Today we will discuss about generic repository pattern. Generic repository pattern. So basically we will create a web API that will use generic repository pattern for DB operations. So we will create 3 layers. First one, database access layer, data access layer. Second one is business logic layer, and the third one is UI, or we can call this as a web API presentation layer. Also we will create one more class library or a layer, we can call it as, which is for entities, common entities. Let's get into the coding. Open Visual Studio, go to new project, select a class library, first we will create a data access layer, data access layer. So solution name I'm giving something like CRUD operations. So we will do the CRUD operations. Click next. I'm using a .NET 8.0. Create. So data access layer is created under a CRUD operation. So first, so now data access layer is there. So first we have to add a package to use entity framework. Click on browse and search for entity framework. We'll use entity framework core. Install this package. Apply. I accept. Now entity framework core package is installed. You can check here. You can edit project file. Here you can see the package. See, so this is being installed. Delete this default class file, and before implementing a database context, we will also add one more project. One more class library. We can call this as models, business models. Create it. I'm calling this as an employee. So basically we have created a model project separately so that whatever tables we want to include in this database, respective models we will create in this model project. So this can be accessible to other layers as well, not only for data access layer but also for other layers like business logic layer and UI presentation layer. For this demo, I am just simply creating only one class, employee. Let's create a few properties. Property integer ID, property string name, property string city. That's enough. Let's rename this to employee. So let's assume this employee is a table which is having a 3 columns, ID, name and city. So we will be performing CRUD operations on this table using repository pattern. So now model is ready. Let's go to the database access layer. So in order to use entity framework, we have to create a data context file. So create a new class. Database context.cs. I'm giving a database context.cs. Let's make it as public. So it should inherit db context, which is from Microsoft Entity Framework core. So whatever tables we want to have in database, for that respective class we have to create a db set in db context class. So I'm creating a public db set employee so we have to add a reference, add project reference models. Now type employee from the models. Right. Let's remove unnecessary usings. So we have one table now in db context. Let's create a one interface. Add a new item, interface. We can call this as I repository. Which is of type T, where T is a class. Here we will create a CRUD operations. So type T get ID. For example, get employee using employee ID. Get list of employees, list of get all. Here no need to pass any parameters. Next create. So create which is of void type. Create. Let's call it as add. Void add T of item. Now we have created all CRUD operations in repository. Let's clean up this. Now we need a repository class which will implement this interface. Add a new class. Call it as repository. which will implement a repository of type T. Let's implement interface. So here create a constructor and pass db context, database context underscore db context. Create private variable, private read only. Database context underscore db context underscore db context equal to db context. Also create one db set, private db set of t underscore db set underscore db set equal to db context dot set t. We are passing db context via constructor, and respect to db set we are setting that value. Now implement a add method. So underscore db set dot add item. We have to change the, we have to save the context. So db context dot save changes. So delete underscore db set. So which item we have to delete? First we need to get the required object variable, required object to delete equal to, we have this method which will give the, if we pass id it will give the respective object. So we will use this method, get pass id. So we will get that one. So db set dot delete db set dot remove. We can pass this required, so it will delete that object. db context dot save changes. Next get by id. So we have db set variable, we have to just return that respective object which is matching with this id. So underscore db set dot find, just simply pass the id. That's enough. Here we have to pass, we have to return all the results. Return underscore db set dot to list. update underscore dv set dot update item underscore dv context dot save changes. So we have created all required CRUD operations using db context. So here if we see, we are creating a repository pattern with the type of T. So usually what will happen, we will create a for example, employee is there, like the department is also there. So for each table we will create a one repository, employee repository, deposit repository, which will implement iEmployee repository, which iEmployee repository will have all CRUD operations separately. So to remove that redundancy, we will use a generic repository pattern. So this is nothing but generic repository pattern. So if we pass employee, it will do the CRUD operations on employee table. If you pass department, it will do the CRUD operations on department. So here reusability is there. So this is the nothing but generic repository pattern. So now let's create a service layer, or we can call it as a business logic layer. In business logic layer, we will create a specific services for respective tables. So for example, here employee is there, so we will create an employee interface and also respective employee service class. This should have a reference to both the projects. Let's add the project references. Okay, so now let's create a interface. I'm naming this as employee service. Here we can create all CRUD operations respective to the employee table. So void add employee of type employee employee get employee employee ID get list of employees also employee get all employees update employee 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 delete employee ID. Created a interface iEmployee service with CRUD operations. So basically this will internally call data access layer to accomplish these operations. So in order to use these operations, we have to create a class which will implement this interface. So let's create a class, add new item class. Let's call this as employee service. Which will implement a employee service. Implement this interface. Now create a constructor. Here we have to pass a repository. A repository Let's mark this as public. Repository. We are injecting a repository object into the employee service constructor. Let's create a read-only variable. Underscore repository equal to repository. Okay, which is of type T, so we have to specify which type it is. It is a of type employee. Okay, so now we have to add employee. We will call repository dot add employee. That's all. So repository dot add employee will call this add method. So here type employee we are passing from the service layer. Similarly for delete underscore repository dot delete id underscore repository dot get all. We have to return this object. Return underscore repository dot get by id. Similarly underscore repository dot update, pass the employee object. Unnecessary usings. So now employee service is ready. Here we are using a repository of type T. We are passing employee. Similarly, in future, if we want to use this for any other tables, we can simply pass the type in T, so that it will be automatically taken care. Now with this business logic layer is ready, let's remove this unnecessary clause. Now let's create a presentation layer, nothing but web API. So ASP.NET Core Web API. ASP.NET Core Web API. Yeah, this one. Click next. I'm giving CRUD APIs. So .NET 8 HTTP, let it be default. Create namespace. Okay, now remove this default controller. So we will create a new controller. API controller will create with read write actions. We will name this as employee controller. Okay. So employee controller is having all CRUD operations: get by ID, insert, update, and delete. Right. Now create a constructor. Here we have to pass iEmployee service. iEmployee service, employee service underscore employee service equal to employee service, which is a read-only variable. Now simply here this is for get all employees. So here we can change this return type to employee. Return employee service dot get all employees. Get by ID. So return employee service dot get employee by ID. Return type employee. This is for adding employee. We can change this to employee type underscore employee service dot add employee value. Underscore employee service dot update employee value. This is of type employee. Similarly for delete, underscore employee service dot delete employee, pass the ID. Yeah. So now we have implemented all APIs which will be exposed to the client. So if client want all employees, then we are calling employee service. That employee service will use repository and pass that employee type and get the all employees. get the all employees. So now with this everything is ready. Let's run and see. Let's make this web API as a startup project. Run. What is this exception? CRUD APIs name was invalid. Okay, so I have given, let's rename this one. Let's remove this one. Okay, now let's run. Now our API is ready. Let's insert something. Try it out. One John hands execute. So it is giving 500 error, internal server error, so unable to resolve business logic layer employee service while attempting to activate. So basically what it is telling, it is not able to identify which object it has to create for employee service. So we have to tell object at runtime using dependency injection. So in .NET 8 or .NET Core, we have to implement that in program.cs. So come to program.cs. Here we can specify services dot. Here we can mention the mapping for dependency injection. Services that add transient and employee service. Yes, employee service will implement employee service. Now let's run and see. Let's try to understand how it is working, right? This application, instead of declaring all at the same time. So the more errors we get, more we will learn. Now what it is telling, business logic and unable to resolve I repository. Again I repository. So here in service layer, it is not able to resolve the I repository. So respective dependency also we have to pass from here. Builder dot services dot transient I repository using general. So which is of type T, so which type it is? Employee. We have to specify the type as well. Employee. Okay, with that we have resolved the dependencies. Now let's run again. there are no errors at compile time. No, we got some error. It is telling unable to resolve service for database access database context, right? So here in database layer, database context we have created, but we have not specified right which database we are using, whether it is SQL Server or in-memory database or some other provider. So that we have to specify. For that, for this demo, I will use in-memory database. Let me install NuGet package entity framework dot in memory. So I'm using in-memory database. So in-memory database actually what it will do, it will create a tables data in memory. So in that particular section, it will keep that values. Once the session is ended, then it will remove the data. So it won't use any physical database. This is installed. Now come back to program.cs and here use that db context builder dot services dot use db context add db context name database context options dot use in memory database. Here we can give some database name database context db something. Context names. Okay, so now we have mentioned which database it has to use. We are using in-memory database. We are also adding db context to the services. Now let's run. Still we are getting a db context was called with configuration of db context only declares parameterless constructor. Declare a constructor that accepts. Okay, so we should, in order to use this db context, we have to create a constructor in db context. That is mandatory. cd over database context db context options. Now it should work. Let's give a try. Yes, Swagger is loaded. Let's try to insert a record. ID 1, name John, city New York, execute. 200. So record is created. It is successful. Let's see whether it is created or not. Give ID as 1 because we have created using ID 1. So it should return John, New York, right? So execute, see ID, name and city. 200 success. It's working. Also we can give a try with other APIs. Let's try to update the value John to Smith, change city New York to some other San Francisco. I don't know the spelling. San France. Let it be. So execute. 200 success. Now again retrieve the record. We should see updated data. See Smith, San Francisco. Now delete the record. Give 1. Execute. Success. Record is deleted. Now if you try to retrieve this record, will get all employees because there are no employees. Should return empty data. So all employees is working, employee by ID is working, adding employee is working, delete employee is working. So we have created CRUD operations for an employee using generic repository pattern, right, where we have created a database access layer. Here we have created a repository which is of type T, and we have created a specific service in business logic layer, and from API we are calling the service layer, and from the service it is going to repository, and from the repository it is executing the DP operations. So this is called generic repository pattern. So here this database access layer, there won't be any changes in future. We just have to pass different types. Remaining it will taken care automatically. Hope you like this video. Thank you for watching. I have provided the GitHub link in description. You can find the source code of this project.